We're talking today with Mr. Clare Yenor of Rockford, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Yenor, can you begin by giving us a little bit of background on yourself? To start with, where and when were you born?
I was born 3/8/21 in Adrian, Michigan, on a farm just outside of town.
Okay, and did you grow up on that farm?
No, at 3 years old, my folks moved into Onstead, Michigan.
And why did they do that?
Well, my dad was a butcher, and he had a butcher store, grocery store.
Mm-hmm. And was he able to keep that through the 30s?
No, he died in 29
Mm-hmm.
when I was 7 years old. He had broken appendix.
Mm-hmm.
In a little town, they didn't have the
Couldn't treat it.
doctors that knew what was there until after it was broken, and then he had to go in the hospital in Adrian. But he didn't make it. There was not all of the penicillins and stuff that they have now.
Right. Now, were there other children in your family too?
I had a brother 2 years younger, and a brother 4 years older, and a sister 5 years older.
So then what did your family do then after your father died?
Well, we stayed at the store for about a year, and my mother couldn't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, about that same time, my grandmother had died, and we moved to my grandfather's in Clayton, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived with them 1 year, and then we were by ourselves about a year, and then we moved to Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I went through rest of grade school and junior and senior high school.
Okay. So did you graduate from high school then?
Yes,
Okay. And when did you graduate?
1939.
Okay. Now, once you graduated, what did you do?
Well, that was, well, let's see. I went to work,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked mainly helping a contractor who did painting and plumbing and wall repairing and stuff of all kinds.
Okay. Did you still live with your mother at that point?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to kind of keep doing that work regularly for the next couple of years, or did you change jobs?
Oh, I did that work for a while. Then I went to work for a manufacturing outfit that where they're putting some big additions on the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there most of 2 years, I guess. First year, my mother got sick, and so she couldn't work, and
Mm-hmm.
I worked long hours, 7 days a week.
Right.
Then I asked her to give me $10 a week for money for the spend on the car, and
Mm-hmm.
$17 to pay on a payment on the car, and the rest of it was hers
Right.
for that entire, from fall away into the spring.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what were you doing at the time Pearl Harbor happened?
I was working there. Well, that must have been about the end of the time that I worked at the factories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember how you heard about the war starting?
No.
Okay. Now, before America got into the war, were you paying any attention to what was going on in the world? Did you know there was a war going on in Europe and all of that?
Oh yes, I knew what was going on. I had a civics teacher in high school who beat it into you,
Mm-hmm.
know what's going on, know the news, read all of the articles you can, you know.
Mm-hmm. And so were you thinking that sooner or later we were probably going to get into it, and maybe you were going to get into it too, or were you not really thinking about that?
No, I was thinking, yes, that way. A little before that, I had appendicitis operation,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't have any insurance, so I had to pay for that in my
Mm-hmm.
hospital and doctor, and then yeah, I thought about going in the service, but my mother didn't like the idea,
Mm-hmm.
And because there was 3 of us boys and a brother-in-law. And so I waited till I was 21. Then I went down and told them I was ready to go. And they were taking mostly fellows that were up close to 38 years old at that time.
All right.
They took the oldest ones first.
Okay. Now, so you had not had a draft notice or anything like that at that point?
No,
All right. And so when did you enlist?
April of 42.
All right. And then once you enlisted, where did they send you?
I went to Detroit for induction, and then went from Detroit, we went to Fort Sill.
Okay. Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
That was kind of the Army's artillery school out there.
Yes.
All right. Now, did they just assign you to the artillery, or did you get to pick in some way?
You went down a line of guys, and big and tall mixed up, and they'd say mule pack, horse drawn, mule pack, horse drawn, depending on your size.
Okay. So once you got to Fort Sill, that was what they were doing with you?
Yeah.
All right. And then what did they assign you to?
The mule pack.
All right. What were they using mules for?
Actually, we did have some troops that fought in Italy with mules, but it was more of a place to train than anything else. Just they're having so many guys coming into the service at the time. They put them wherever they had room for them to train.
Okay. But why were they using mules? What were they for?
Well, because you could go through terrain you couldn't pick trucks or stuff with.
Okay. Now, had you ever worked with mules or horses before?
Well, I had worked on a farm, yes. But was quite different than farm horses. They everything was you did to keep the mules ready to go, keep them in good shape all the time. If you went on a trip or a forced march or anything, the first thing you did when you got through was rub those mules down and clean up the harnesses and, before you did anything for yourself.
All right. How well behaved were the mules? I mean, did they cooperate and do what they were supposed to?
Most of the time. Was one incident where it started storming and we had to go out in a big barnyard and a lot of buildings and stuff and catch the mules, and they always had halters on, and take them back inside the buildings. Well, I got a hold of a mule that I had a rope from his halter. Started to go, one building was full. I started to go out of that building toward the next building, and a big clap of lightning hit, and that mule jumped in the air. I tried to hang on to him, and he swung right around like this, and I hit the side of the barn and let go. And I don't know what happened to the mule, but somebody else probably got him.
Okay. Now, let's kind of go to sort of the beginning of basic training. You get out to Fort Sill. What kind of drill and stuff did you get when you got there? What kind of basic training did they give you?
Oh, you get all of the normal things for basic training, marching and following orders. And it's the biggest thing that is done for training is to try to get you to follow commands as soon as they're made.
And now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to doing that?
Oh, it wasn't hard. Were
there people there who had more trouble or got in a lot of trouble?
Oh, to some extent, yes. Like I said, I was in training with quite a few men that were older, and quite a few of them had soft jobs, and they couldn't take it. They had to drop out.
Do you have any idea what happened to them or where they went? Were they allowed out of the Army or just assigned somewhere else?
Assigned somewhere else, yes.
Okay. Now, where were the men in your unit you were training with from? Were they all over the country or mostly from certain places?
Well, from quite a number of spots. Quite a few came from Detroit, Michigan, and in other places in Michigan, and then there was a number from the southern states too.
Mm-hmm.
There's pretty well mixed up.
Okay. Now, did they have sort of a basic training first and then artillery training, or did they mix the artillery stuff in all the time?
Well, the basic training probably came for the first couple of weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and then started mixing in. Yes.
Okay. Now, what kinds of things were you doing by way of artillery training? What were you learning to do?
Well, you had to learn to take care of the guns.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was a 175 howitzer, and you learned how to divide up they broke down the gun into so that it would pack on 6
Mm-hmm.
mules,
Mm-hmm.
and you know where to pack them and how to tighten up the cinches and so
Right.
forth. And they had them assigned different guys to lead a mule and different guys. I didn't get assigned anything. I was the gunner,
Mm-hmm.
and so when we went on force marches, I took quite a few pictures just running off to the
Mm-hmm.
side and sticking out, coming back, things that I had never seen either, buffalo
Mm-hmm.
and pretty countryside. Well, then we did this quite a while. One time, we were on a forced march with the mules and went through a small river and went up the other side, and it was quite steep. And one of the mules slipped backward into the river. Well, you had to be sure he kept his head above water, so
Mhm.
somebody always had him by the head trying to
Right.
keep his head above water. Then there were others getting the pack off from him,
Mm-hmm.
and then we carried the pack up the bank, and the mule went empty till we got up on level ground, and then we had to repack him.
All right. Sounds like a pretty good adventure there. Now, how much actual training did you get firing the weapon? I mean, you're the gunner. Did you get a lot of target practice or that kind of thing?
Yes, we did quite a little as time went on. You know,
Mhm.
13 weeks was a pretty good length of time for basic training.
Right. Okay, so you're there at Fort Sill for 13 weeks. You're doing this kind of training, and then what did you do next?
Well, after that was over with, then a group of us got sent to the beginning of the 215th Field Artillery Battalion,
Mm-hmm.
and it was collecting men from all over.
Right.
And then we commenced glider training.
All right. And were you still at Fort Sill at this point, or had they sent you somewhere else?
No, we were at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay. All right. And you start glider training. Well, tell us about that. What was going on there?
Well, we were the first unit that got involved with gliders. Basically, all we did was try to train ourselves to load those gliders,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to learn to tie them down in certain spots on the glider so that the stuff wouldn't move, shift. And that we did it in wooden walk-ups at first. We didn't have the glider itself, but just a wooden walk-up.
It was sort of a big old box that was the right size.
Yeah, it was right this size.
Now, what were you loading on the gliders? Was this artillery?
We loaded men first to see
Mhm.
where they could get them seated, you know.
Right.
And then we loaded ammunition with
Mhm.
piled in the center and tied down. And it had to be tied down real good. And we had to do that, know what we were doing well enough to do it all in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And then we put a trailer in there, but we never put the Jeep itself in there.
Mm-hmm. And did you put the guns on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, the 175
Well,
howitzers were not.
yeah. They were 75 millimeter howitzers.
75
They're
millimeter.
relatively small guns. Those are the same ones that you were taking apart and putting on the mules?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you were putting them on the gliders kind of in pieces the way you would with the mules?
No, the whole thing would go in there.
Or were they all put together before you put them on the plane?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, how much time did you spend doing that? How long were you at Fort Bragg?
Well, we were there. We must have been there about a year and a half or so. I don't know.
All right. Well, that's a pretty long time to stay in one place, and a lot of
Yeah.
other guys are shipping out and going other places,
Yeah.
and you're still there. Did you get a chance to go on leave or on liberty while you were based at Fort Bragg?
Yes, I had, after I'd been in the service just over a year, I had a week to go home.
Mm-hmm. And did you go back to Michigan then?
Yes.
Okay. And what
Yeah.
was it like to go back after a year in the Army?
Well, after I had been there a short time in the mule pack, I was a friend with a fellow who lived on a farm up near Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm.
And so he asked me if I wanted to write to a girl, and I said, well, sure, I'll write to her. And it was a girl who lived across the street from his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote to her all the rest of the time, and I eventually married her.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got the furlough, I decided that if I didn't go up there first, I wouldn't go, probably. So I took the bus route around by Grand Rapids and back to Adrian.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you had that week, and then eventually you're back there again at Fort Bragg. Did you go off the base in Fort Bragg much, or go into town or anything like that?
Oh, sometimes yes, but I wasn't interested in looking for women or for drinking, so I didn't go most of the time.
Were you near a town? Is that near a town of any size, or was it pretty well out in the country?
Oh, let's see. I think it was Fayetteville.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Not too far.
Not a real big town, big enough to get some of the guys in trouble, but
Yeah.
not that interesting maybe otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you wind up staying with glider units or things like that, or did your battalion just become a regular artillery battalion at some point?
No. As we went along, then we went to a cadre of us.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Alliance, Nebraska, and there we got contact with the officers of the 182nd Airborne Division, and
82nd Airborne,
80th,
yeah, and 101st?
101st, and we trained those officers what we knew about the gliders and loading and everything else.
All right. Now, did you have real gliders by this time?
Yes,
All right. And did they actually practice landing them with these loads in them?
yes, yes.
All right. And so how well did you do?
Well, we did pretty well. On one big mission, or you might call it, we had I forgot the number, but quite a number of them, gliders, and only one was completely broken up.
Mm-hmm. Now, were there people getting injured in accidents in these gliders and that kind of thing?
That was the idea, that that the C-47s would be equipped with stretchers and things that you could put injured people in and take them back.
All right. So you've got C-47s, regular twin-engine transport planes, as well as the gliders. Now, did you load the C-47s too?
Yes.
Okay. What would you put on them?
Well, when we took them in, we put ammunition and jeeps in some of them.
Okay. You have to explain how you would get a jeep onto one of these planes. I mean, the C-47, I think, is a military version of the old DC-3.
Yes.
And they're sort of regular early passenger type plane. Where do you put a jeep on there? How do you get it on?
Well, there was a fairly large door in the back,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to roll it up. We could drive it up the skids,
Mm-hmm.
all right, and so the front end of it stuck into the glider.
Okay.
And then we had to, from there, most of the weight was through the doorway, but then we had to lift it and shift it sideways as we went in, and the driver was kept turning, and we kept shifting the thing to get it through the doorway.
Now, once you got the thing in, assuming the C-47 gets where it's supposed to go and it lands, how do you get the Jeep out?
The same way.
Okay. So you have to just jiggle it, shimmy it out first, and then you can drive it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, at what point did you finish working with these airborne units? How far along was that?
Well, let's see the dates. Probably until late in 43.
Mm-hmm. And then once you finished with that duty, did you return to your battalion then?
Yes, for a short time,
Mm-hmm.
and then they switched us over to 155 howitzers,
Okay.
and then the whole battalion was 155.
Okay. So you became essentially a regular heavy artillery battalion rather than a specialized airborne unit.
Yes.
Do you have any idea why they did that?
Well, I think because they were not having success with those
Mm-hmm.
gliders,
Okay.
and so they didn't figure they were going to use them. And the 155 howitzers were the favorite of
Mm-hmm.
General Patton, who
Mm-hmm.
was the head of the army. And
All right, so you get those. All right. Now, did your battalion stay at Fort Bragg while it was training on the 155s, or did you move someplace else?
I can't remember
Okay,
dates.
That's
can't
not
remember
particularly
dates.
important. Now, at a certain point, you're going to ship out and go over to Europe. When did that happen? Was it the fall of 44? Was it after D-Day, or?
Yes, it was right after D-Day.
Okay. Now, where did they ship you out from?
From New York.
Okay. And what kind of ship were you on?
Liberty ship.
All right. And did you have your guns on the ship with you, or were they somewhere else?
No, they went somewhere else. They didn't go.
Okay.
We didn't go together.
Mm-hmm.
By accident, I guess. We got to England, and then we went to France, and we didn't have any guns.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit here. What was that ocean voyage like?
Yeah. Well, it was slow.
Mm-hmm.
The ships are slow, and they had to do a lot of zigzagging
Right.
and so forth. And I think the convoy we were in lost one ship to German.
Okay, so
submarines.
there were submarine alerts then.
Yeah.
All right. How was the weather when you were going across?
The weather wasn't too bad. It was rough sometimes, but
Okay.
not real bad.
But it was summer. You weren't in the middle of
Yeah.
the really bad weather at that point.
No.
Okay. Where did they land you in England?
We
Or Scotland, or where'd you go?
No, we didn't go to Scotland. We went to I can't remember the town. On the would have been the
Was it along like Liverpool or Bristol or someplace like that, or was it along the Channel coast?
no, it was on the other side, and then we left on the Channel coast, and we landed at Le Havre,
Okay.
France.
You landed at Le Havre, and about when do you think you went over to France?
Well, we were there about a week before all of our stuff got caught up with
Mm-hmm.
us, and then we went.
Okay. And then what larger group was your battalion assigned to?
Well, we had been assigned earlier to the Corps Artillery.
Mm-hmm.
Then we never knew what outfit we would be with.
Mm-hmm.
That list on the map shows all the different outfits that were concerned with the Battle of the Bulge, of
Right.
course.
So you were basically a reserve artillery unit within the Third Army. Was that?
Yeah.
So you were sort of answering to Patton ultimately at
Yes.
that point.
But as artillery orders came through the Corps Artillery
Mm-hmm.
to go and help this group.
Right.
This group was back
Okay.
and forth.
Now, what did France look like to you when you got there?
Well, there was a lot of buildings and everything, of course, all smashed up and all that sort of thing.
Did you see much of the civilian population there?
No.
Okay.
No. Some. We had, I think I had a 3-day pass to go to Paris one time. I didn't spend any money of mine. The Army gave you cigarettes.
Okay.
Issued so much cigarettes every month, you know. And I didn't smoke, so I saved the cigarettes. And when I got to France, I sold the cigarettes to pay for everything I did.
All right. Well, what do you do in Paris if you're not drinking and carousing?
Oh, went to the amusement parks, and I went. Oh, I did go to a burlesque show. That sort of the burlesque show there was beautiful. This coloring and stuff.
Yeah, very, very big, fancy stage shows. Yeah. All right. Now, where would you sleep when you were in Paris?
Went in a hotel.
Okay. And so your cigarettes covered that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Did you buy any presents for anybody, like your girlfriend back home?
No, the only thing was for a pretty little dress for my niece. And I guess that's about the only thing I bought, sent home.
All right. Okay. Now, do you remember about what time of year it was when you actually got to France? Was it in the fall? Or?
It was fall, yes.
Okay. And then where was your battalion first stationed?
Well, I don't remember that we were stationed anywhere from that point on. We kept moving.
You just moved around. Did you sleep in tents most of the time, or did they find buildings for you? Or?
Well, no, we were supposed to dig foxholes, and big enough to get in under the level of the ground.
Right.
And we did most of the time, but then there were times when not everybody did it. We had a kitchen crew that decided they didn't need to get in and 3 of them got killed that night because they were not underground.
All right. How long was it once you were in France before your battalion started to go into action and start shooting at people?
Oh, quite soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time that you actually had to use the guns in a battle?
No, not too well, no.
Okay. Well, how does it actually work for you? I mean, were you still a gunner at that point?
No, I was chief of section.
Okay. And so what were your duties?
Oh, I was the leader of a artillery section, or gun section. And there was 4 gun sections in each
battery?
Battery.
Yeah.
Well, and then there was 4 batteries in the battalion. And then there was maintenance sections, and radio sections, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And it was, I always thought the job of the chief of section was more or less a babysitter. I never particularly liked that because you had to keep track of all of the guys, whether they rode home, whether they were brushing their teeth, whether they're getting to bed, or whether they got it back in after when they'd been out. And sometimes we when they get to go to town, and there'd be somebody that would get drunk and couldn't get home, and I was in town, and one of them did, and then there's another sergeant from another sea battery, and we practically carried that guy because he couldn't stand up, but he was awake enough to, whenever he'd see a woman, start yelling, you know, and we tried to choke him down, you know.
Now, by this time, were you mostly serving with men who were younger than you were?
No, not as much. There was some older men, but they had sort of eliminated the biggest share of the real older ones. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you sort of had more kids then and people who needed babysitting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's okay when you're not in action. Now, if there was a fight going on and you are using the guns, what was your job?
I had to see that everything was running right.
Mm-hmm.
The gunner then, that he was getting his things set up right.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a corporal who was in charge of the ammunition,
Mm-hmm.
ammunition corporal, and he was to see that his jobs got done. And
Now, did you have a radio operator who could tell you how to adjust your firing and things like that?
no, it all come down. We were close enough together, so it came to there's a forward observer,
Mm-hmm.
and the forward observer called back,
Right.
and the unit lieutenants took those orders and gave them to the,
Okay. So the forward observers report to the battery,
yeah,
and then the battery command then tells the sections what to do.
yeah.
Okay. Now, how quickly could they fire that gun?
Didn't take very long. The first thing was, of course, to get the thing. We had stakes set out 50 feet, 100 feet away from the gun.
Mm-hmm.
You sighted on those, and
Right.
then from those coordinates, you worked from those.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you went left or right or up or down, or and we had to see that everything was set up just right. Well, it didn't take very long because you were trained to do quickly
Right.
as you could. But I had to check to make sure that everything was set,
Mm-hmm.
and he gave the lieutenants in charge would call for, "Are you ready?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody reported back, "Yes,
Right.
sir." Yeah. And so then we got the order to fire.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And of course, it was a big explosion when that thing went off.
Right.
We,
Did they have ear protection for the artillerists?
We didn't have, no.
Oh.
We ducked our heads and opened our mouths, and to kind of make it a little easier.
Mm-hmm. And did you have men who would get busted eardrums or things like that?
No, not. I don't think we had anybody that got busted eardrums. No.
But what would the effect of that noise be? I mean, or why would you open your mouth?
Well, the concussion of the thing
Mhm.
was let the sound go through
Right.
your system.
Okay. Now, once you were firing and you were on target, about how many rounds in a minute could they fire?
Well, sometimes we could get a mission that said, "Fire at will."
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you loaded up and fired, loaded up and fired.
Mm-hmm.
And other times you had to, we did a fire mission where they had a timing device on the end of the projectile,
Mm-hmm.
and you could set that for just
Right.
a time
Mm-hmm.
that you did before it would go off after it was fired.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, you didn't set that, you let it go off when it had hit something,
Mhm.
impact. But they found out that if they timed this so that they would go off in the air,
Right.
that they got more people hurt
Right.
by a shower of metal going down.
All right. Now, your unit winds up getting caught up in the Battle of the Bulge campaign. You're kind of involved through all of that. What was actually going on, or what did you and your unit wind up doing in that period, kind of December into January 44, 45?
Well, we were in the Ardennes Mountains,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very, very cold and snow and
Mm-hmm.
ice. And when we went into the winter, we didn't have any boots, and our feet would get wet, and,
Mhm.
and you had to be careful to try to keep them from freezing.
Right.
I always carried some socks inside of my shirt
Mm-hmm.
so they would dry.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you got a chance, you change socks, put in the shoes, so it helped.
Did the men in your unit have a lot of problems then with frostbite or trench foot or other things like that?
We had, yes, we had a lieutenant who froze his feet and had to go back, and we never saw him again. And his driver, that was a forward observer, and his driver moved enough so that he didn't get frozen.
Were they sleeping in the Jeep, or were they?
No, in foxholes.
Okay.
And they were in an area at the Bulge where they couldn't get out until, and so they just stayed there for, it wasn't too long before the rest of the troops came on.
Now, did you have to do a lot of moving around then in that campaign? Were they moving your battalion from place to place, or did you set up in one spot and stay there a long time?
No, we moved a great deal. We moved anywhere that where there was help needed to furnish firepower.
Now, how dangerous was that as work? Were you being attacked by the Germans, either through bombardment or aircraft or anything like that?
Oh yes. The Germans had their favorite gun, and it was a really good gun. It was the 88, and it was on tracks. It was mobile. It could move fast, and it was hard to catch up with. Really, I mean, they would come into a position, and they did one night. They'd start firing on you, and you didn't know where it was at first, but of course you found out. But they could move those things so fast. They could really move out, get to some other spot somewhere else.
Well, an 88 was primarily either an anti-aircraft weapon or a direct fire weapon. But were they using indirect fire against your artillery when they're shooting up in the air to have it land on you?
Well, some of it was that, yes.
Of course, they had regular artillery too. How would you know what was shooting at you?
Well, the lieutenant I told you was our forward observer, and his driver. His driver was kind of a crazy guy. I mean, you know, but every time when the shell would go off, you'd go running off and try to find pieces of it, so you could bring it back and have somebody decide what shells they were shooting.
Okay, so you know what was shooting at you then. All right. Now, did your unit take a lot of casualties in this period? I mean, was the enemy shooting at you and that kind of thing?
Not an exceptional lot, no. We had some, but not overwhelmed.
Okay. I mean, you had your cooks or whatever who didn't want to go in foxholes. Was that in the Bulge when that happened, or was that earlier? Or?
No, that was. I think that was just before the Bulge.
Okay. Now, as you were moving around in that area in the Ardennes, and your unit history has you going back and forth quite a bit through Luxembourg and then farther north as the campaign goes on, what kind of evidence did you see of the battle that had been going on? I mean, what signs were there that there'd been a big fight there?
Well, there were lots of blown up machinery and stuff, you know, like the truck, or it might be we had tracks run on steel tracks with cleats on them, you know, to pull a gun. At one point, it was so slippery that we had to go without a guns for several days until they went back to the maintenance ordnance, and that's where we got the cleats, the big cleats, and the tracks were so wide, and then these big thick cleats, you know, that would dig in, and that was during the time they were gone, we had to pull a gun with trucks.
Well, wouldn't the trucks have real problems with the ice and the snow?
Oh yeah, they did. They had trouble, but they did have some traction because of big cleats on the tires. And
Okay,
stuff.
so they had the cleats on the tires, so it's like having studs or snow tires or whatever to drive that with. All right. Now, were there any problems involved with firing artillery and so forth when it was really cold like that? Could the guns freeze up or anything?
No, we didn't have any trouble. They're freezing up, but we did have to be careful to clean them real good.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we fired, we had to clean them.
Okay. Right. Now, once the Germans are pretty well pushed out of the Bulge in middle of January or so of 45, did your unit just continue to go around to different places? Did they move you to a different sector eventually, or what happened with your unit after that?
Well, after the war was, or the Battle of Bulge, of course, there was still some war going on for a while.
Right.
But then we got shifted to a discharging. We went down into Austria, and a big prison camp set up.
Mm-hmm.
And there they had German interrogators who were interrogating all those prisoners as fast as they could, and if they had any sign at all of SS troops, then they were kept, and then we had to take them to another camp. And the people who were ordinary soldiers, they just let them go on their way. They gave them some food and stuff.
Okay. Well, that's sort of at the end of the war, but
Yes.
you've got a number of months there in between. So what was your unit doing in the early months of 45 before the war ended?
Early months of 45.
Because the map has you going up to the Maastricht area, the Netherlands, and then across the Rhine into Germany.
Yes.
And so were you with the unit doing those things?
Yes, those were still times when the war was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And was the experience any different in those later stages of the war? Did things change in terms of what you did or how you operated or what the Germans were doing?
Well, at that point, it wasn't the hard winter that it had been earlier, and so it was a little easier that way. We were at the point where we crossed the Rhine River. We expected a lot of resistance, and so the bridges had been blown mostly, and the engineers had set up pontoons to go across the river.
Right.
And I don't know why, but we got to be the first one to go across. And they told us to go across our section, our gun, get set up so we could fire in a pretty good range of open space.
Right.
And then they would send the rest across. So we got all set up, and we never did have to. We didn't get fired on, and we didn't have to fire any over there until the rest got across.
All right. Now, how easy or hard was it to get the guns across on a pontoon bridge?
Oh, it wasn't. It wasn't exactly easy, but it went pretty well. You know, things were kind of shifting around.
Okay. Did you have the tractors pulling them across, or trucks, or what were you using?
The tractors.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, once you were across the Rhine, I mean, was your unit engaged very much, or were you mostly just moving around?
Well, we did. We moved around a lot. We still did move around. We didn't always stay very long with one unit until we had changed the our attack that helped the rest of them get on, and then we moved to another spot. You noticed on that map all the list of places where we stopped.
I noticed that sort of in part of northern Germany, they mark a number of places where there were battles or engagements. There were still Germans shooting back once in a while.
Yeah.
All right. Now, throughout the period there when the war was going on, did you ever get attacked by German aircraft, or did you just get artillery?
No, we did get some German aircraft, yeah.
And would they come at night or during the day, or?
Usually during the day. Not much happened at night. Yeah.
And were there very many of them, or just a few at a time?
Just a few at a time, mostly. Of course, our air forces and stuff were getting control of things. You know.
Okay. Now, did you, as you were as the war was kind of winding down, you're going into Germany, and then eventually you're down, you're actually dealing with German prisoners. You're going to start to see a lot of what's left of the German army. What impression did you have of the German soldiers once you saw them?
Well, they were, the average run of them who were just ordinary people, just ordinary fellows. And they were not extremely expert, or but the SS troops were the highlight of the German armies, and they were very, very strict, very military in everything they did. And anytime anybody came near them, the German people even, they just demanded the best of everything. And
did they look like they were better fed or supported or supplied than the ordinary soldiers were?
Yes.
Okay. Now the regular soldiers, were they mostly kind of standard military age, or were there a lot who were younger or older?
There was a lot of younger ones. There was a lot of younger ones. And at one time we ran across a lot of horse-drawn artillery that they had used.
Yeah, well, the Germans had a lot of horse-drawn stuff throughout the whole war. You associate them with the tanks and stuff, but yeah. What condition were the horses in?
Well, when we saw them, it was just junk. Some horses, dead. The machines all.
Now, did you see much of the German civilian population, either before or after the war ended?
No, well, at the end of the war, we could go to town and stuff. We saw quite a bit of the German population.
And in general, how did the German civilians seem to behave toward the Americans? They just stay out of their way, or what did they do?
They kind of stayed out of the way, yeah.
Were there any dangers of Germans after the war was ended still trying to take shots at you or anything like that? Were there still people making trouble?
No, I never ran into anything like that. They're mostly pretty quieted down.
Okay. Now, when you were in Germany and Austria there once the war ends and it's over, at any point did you visit any prison camps or concentration camps? Did you see any of that kind of thing?
Well, I had the job of transferring those people from the campground where we were, the SS troops, from that campground to another campground. And for some reason or other, they assigned some Hungarian soldiers as escort.
And the Hungarians had been on the German side during the war.
Yeah, but that was the funny thing, it was after the war. And of course, they didn't like the Germans. The Germans didn't treat them too well.
Right.
And so they would want to stop so they could search those Germans and see what they had on them. And we carried them from one place to the other in the big trucks, just like our big trucks with a cover over it and a bunch of them inside.
And then did you drop off the Hungarians as well, and did they stay as guards, or did they go with you, or what happened?
No, they dropped off and after it was done, and I don't know where they went.
Because in the long run, they probably get repatriated over. But yeah, I mean, I actually had never heard of anything like that, of our using people who had been German soldiers for that sort of duty.
Yeah.
All right, so not something you're normally aware of at that point. All right. Now, how long did you stay in Germany after the war ended?
Well, the war ended
in May.
And yeah, and I didn't get out of there until the end of the year.
Okay. So what were you doing all that time then? I mean, you had some of this stuff working with the prisoners early on.
Yeah.
But then what else?
Well, they started dividing up people according to the number of points they'd earned. And so there would be a number of people taken from one outfit and sent to another, and some others sent here. We got all shifted around then because of that point system.
And so where were you in the scheme of things? I mean, did you have less points than a lot of people, or?
Well, I had the least points because I did not have any direct dependence.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't been hurt,
Right.
and so.
And you were not a rifleman or something like that up in the front lines.
No.
Yeah. All right, so you kind of had to wait around a while. Now, were you assigned to different units? Were you moved out of your original battalion, or did the battalion stay together?
No, the battalion got all broken up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, do you remember where you were when the word came that you finally got to go home?
I mean, we must have been in Austria at the
Mm-hmm.
time. Yeah. But we left, when we left from there, we left from Le Havre.
Okay.
No, wait a minute. Le Havre is
Well,
France.
yeah. But a lot of
But-
guys left from there. Or did they send you down to Italy and out that way?
Yes.
Okay.
We went down went out through the lower part and
Mm-hmm.
up through the.
You kind of cross the Alps and go into Italy. And then, did you leave from southern France or from Italy?
We left from southern France.
Okay, so Marseille or someplace like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was again on Liberty ships.
Mm-hmm. Now, how was the trip back? Was that better or worse than the way over?
Oh, it was a little better because you didn't do much jogging around and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, you know. But a lot of guys got sick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we did have, our group had a couple guys that were working in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And so they bring us back a bunch of crackers.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the time we just ate crackers.
Right.
So we did get sick. And we would go out on deck as much as possible, fresh air.
Okay. Now, once you got back to the States, then what did you do?
Well, it was pretty short order that we were discharged.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was not much time in between the time we got
Right.
back in.
Yeah. And then you're discharged, then you went back home to Michigan at that point?
Yes.
Okay. How long before you got married?
Well, I was married in April.
Okay. And then what kind of work did you do once you were back?
I went to work for Consumers Energy, electric power.
Mm-hmm. And did you stay with them for a long time, or did you change jobs?
No, I stayed there for 30 years.
All right. Okay. Are there other particular events or things that happened to you in your time in the service that tend to come back to you that you haven't mentioned to us here yet?
Well, we had some close calls sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We had a shell. We were ready to move out, pretty near ready. The guys were having trouble getting the gun hitched to the
Mm-hmm.
tractor. And they called, and I went to help and got it done. But a shell slid probably 15 feet away from us, but it didn't explode.
Mm-hmm.
It plowed into the dirt and never exploded.
But a 155 shell would do a lot of damage even at 50 feet.
Yeah, but that was not a 50.
Okay. That was a 75? Or?
That was probably one of the 88s,
Oh, a German shell.
German shell.
Oh, okay, a dud. All right. Okay. Now, to look back on the whole thing now, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you, either the way you see the world or look at life or anything else like that?
Well, you didn't really see the world as it is.
Mm-hmm.
You saw it as a junk pile.
Mm-hmm.
I never was bothered by much of anything,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't mind. I knew that somebody had to be over there,
Right.
and that I was probably the one to go.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own family, I was the first one to go and the last one to get home.
Mm-hmm.
But my brother, I met twice, once in the United States and once overseas. And my older brother. The younger brother went to Hawaii, which was there all the time. And my brother-in-law got in late and got injured early, so he was there for a short time. But he had pretty bad injury. He had shrapnel in his back a year after, not shrapnel, but cloth from his clothing.
Yeah.
A year after he got home, that the steel had to be taken out. He had quite a time.
All right. Do you think on the whole thing it was a positive experience for you, or just something that you did and got done and then you just went back to your life? Or?
Yes. I think it was just something that you had to do, or somebody had to do.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and telling us about it today. Okay. That should do it on our end. So we can pull these things out. Switch off.